So I'm delighted that after our initial foray into podcasting last year, powers that be at Venture Recruitment Partners have decided it was a good idea to commission a further 5 episodes. We've pulled out the stops with all the interviewees this series, and producer Chloe has also invested in some fancy new technology and editing software, so hopefully onwards and upwards. Throughout the next 5 weeks, I'll be speaking to highly successful individuals from the world of accountancy practice, the motor trade and elite sport, covering a variety of topics, including change management, coaching and brand differentiation. We'll hopefully be able to provide some inspiration and advice across several areas, as well as finding out a little bit more about the people behind the successful individuals. Welcome to The Balance Sheet with me, Andrew Murkitt. This week, I'm joined by Darren Cooper, Managing Director at Peter Cooper Motor Group. During Darren's nearly 30 years with the business, which was set up by his father over 40 years ago, he's worked his way up from initially starting as a workshop apprentice through the ranks and has been Managing Director for the last 16 years. This week, Darren and I will be discussing the importance of value and culture, and who better to advise than the leader of one of the South Coast's most long-standing brands, with responsibility for over 300 employees and 50,000 active customers. I think I've got my stats right.
You have, yep. Well done.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
I guess the first question to ask on that topic is, how would you describe the culture and values at Peter Cooper, and why is it important to you initially?
Well, I think it's important because I think culture generally is the foundation of any successful organisational business. Mm-hmm. From our perspective, it's always been a privately owned business and set up. The company name is the person that obviously founded it, being Peter Cooper, my father, and so having a personal name above the door and also being a family business has always really driven the backbone of what our culture is. Mm-hmm. And that's been really important to us over the last, say, 10, 11 years, especially as we've expanded. Mm-hmm. And we've acquired more businesses or we've opened more showrooms, that culture can naturally be diluted over different geographical locations because I can't be everywhere all at the same time. So you're all of a sudden reliant on your teams, whether they're the people in the departments or the people running the departments, to really shape and develop the culture on an ongoing basis. So it's been really important to us to have a program that we can really sort of hang our hat on and say, look, this is who we are, this is why we want to be that person as a business moving forward. So we have a uniform culture existing within every business. Doesn't matter where you visit.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think you obviously showed us around just before we sat down here around the offices here, and I think it was really interesting because there's certainly not an ivory tower feel at all. You very much sort of, I think everyone we walked past sort of knew who you were and you knew who they were.
I'd hope so.
which I think is sort of testimony to what you're saying there, and I think that's great to hear. You initially touched there on obviously the business was set up, and I did. The business was set up by your father initially.
Yeah.
Was it always sort of your aim to go into the family business? Was that always on the radar?
Yeah, it was always mine, I think.
Yeah.
Probably. So when it was set up, I was 6, and I think sort of even in those fairly early years, I remember sort of being 8 years old. I was coming in to do a Saturday morning job when Dad was coming in anyway, working. Yeah. So I'd clean the courtesy cars and clean the demonstrators and stuff like that. Didn't always do a very good job, maybe. But I won't admit that to many people. But so it was always really sort of in my blood as such from an early age. And I think from probably 10 years upwards, my summer holiday jobs, all those sorts of things were always in the business, whether they were in the workshops or helping out generally wherever I thought I could help. So, I understood that I enjoyed cars generally, and that I understood, it did help. Yeah. But the driving factor was people. I really enjoyed the interaction with people. So I never really wanted to go into a career or a job where I was going to be a bit of a lone ranger. I wanted something where I could interact and engage. And the family business has always been a pull to that. Yeah. There was always one caveat that Peter always said, you've got to have a plan B. So you've got to do A-levels and do university, and then if it doesn't work out, then we'll change direction and you can go and do your plan B. But it was always really in my head. I only ever had one option.
Yeah.
So I had to make it work.
Good. No, it shows, and I think you can. It's quite clear sometimes, isn't it, when you meet people, whether they're genuinely passionate about what they do, or there's a little bit of not fakery, but a little bit of putting on, and I think you can definitely tell that yours is the latter. No, I'm joking.
Yeah,
the form. So no, that's really good.
Thank you.
How do you tend to, or how do you encourage the managers beneath you and other people in different sites and various other things? How do you sort of ensure and encourage them to sort of pass on the cultures and values that you mentioned?
There's a number of ways that we do it, and recognizing, like I said, that the culture really is sort of the foundation of the business. It helps us really sort of unite as a team and engage. It gives us a guide for when we're making decisions and actions and policies. We quite often say, does that fit and align with PETA? PETA is the acronym for our values. Yep. So our values are to be professional, to deliver excellence, to act with trust, everyone working together, so teamwork, and to treat everybody with respect. And we didn't set out to make sure that our values ended up having the acronym as PETA, but we realized we had the P, E, T, and the R, which is why teamwork is everyone working together rather than just teamwork. But actually, over it's nearly 10 years on now, 9 years, and that just makes it much easier for people to remember. We then make sure that we do everything else is encapsulated by those values. So if we're changing a policy or setting up a policy or a process, then we'll sense check that with, okay, does that fit within PETA? And that becomes not just a conversation that I'm having, but I know it's working when I hear other people around the business that I'm not even engaged in that conversation, and I can hear them saying exactly the same thing. And also making sure that people understand their behaviour. If somebody's not acting as though in line with how everybody would expect, then I've also heard people say, look, that behaviour is not very PETA, or that's not very PETA. We need to do something about that.
Yeah.
And over the years, it's trying to make sure that everybody understands that they drive and they create the culture on an ongoing basis. It can't be done by just one person, i.e. me, or even our management team. It has to be done by everybody across all of the departments, across all of the sites.
No, it's brilliant, and as I said, I think I mentioned there, it's one thing sort of having values, but sort of making sure that they're sort of fully embodied and embraced across the business
definitely
is really important. Good. One thing I noticed as well, just having walked around and having a quick sort of look on the website and stuff before, you guys do some really good sort of charitable work locally, which not all businesses do. Here at Venture, we do a lot of charitable work, but not all local businesses do. Do you think that's something that helps you stand out from competitors potentially, and what makes you unique as a business, potentially as an employer, but also as a client or customer?
I think it's always been really close to the family's heart. I think, again, having a personal name above the door, that is, a family within that community, always will make sure that we're giving something back wherever possible. So I've grown up with that as a culture. Does it make us stand out against our competitors? I guess you'd be a good judge of that.
Yeah,
I'd hope so, but obviously
it can't harm, can it?
Everybody does it to a certain extent.
Yeah, exactly.
We try and do more than we need to do from a business perspective. So whether we're in marketing and advertising reviews, or just general management reviews, there'll always be a challenge of, we do an awful lot of charity work, whether we're working with charities to help raise their awareness on various different initiatives that they're doing, or whether it's to actually raise money for them. We're always challenging ourselves to make sure we're doing enough. Not enough for the business, but enough for the community that we can afford to do. we actually set up the Peter Cooper Motor Group Foundation in 2021. And that was really to provide an umbrella for all the works. Because like I said, we've always done a fair amount of activity in this area, but we haven't always shouted about it. So if you were a customer or even a member of staff to a certain point, you might not be aware of all that we do. So the foundation was set up for two reasons. One, to be an overarching umbrella for us to be able to put everything underneath sort of one roof, as it were, on the website, so people can sort of have an awareness of the difference that we make within our communities. And two, obviously, so the staff are very aware of it as well, because I think, again, it makes sure that everybody, both customer and staff, understands our commitment to giving back, to giving a sense of community, and to making sure that our employees feel connected with the work that we're doing in the community as well. One of the other things that we do to really try and drive that engagement with our staff is a Match It initiative. So I will challenge every member of staff, ideally, to do something for a charity of their choice. They can do it for a charity we work with, or for one that's just really close to them and their family. But we'll match fund every member of staff up to £100 each year. So obviously that's potentially
really
£30,000 a year that we would be giving. Unlikely that everybody's going to do it, but whether they want to do a skydive or a cake sale or a sponsored walk or anything at all, whatever they raise up to £100 will match per person.
What are you doing this year, Darren?
I haven't decided yet.
Yeah.
I've got to get that. I'm very conscious that if I do too much outside of already a busy work, I might end up a single man, which I desperately don't want. So I haven't committed yet, but we'll definitely be doing something.
We spoke about how you and the guys here sort of project and what your ethos values are as a company. But I guess, how would you advise aspiring leaders who maybe work in this business or in other businesses to sort of project company ethos, trends and values going forward?
I think if I look at our journey, we set a working group up of different people across the businesses to work out what our mission statement was and what our values were, because I was really conscious I didn't want it to be something that was just important to me. Because I didn't think it would then have a chance of really sort of proving itself and living and breathing in the business, which ultimately, if it's the foundation of your business and how people engage on a day-to-day basis, then it needs to have longevity. So I would always probably lead by example. There's no point in having core values or things relating around that if you're not living and breathing it yourself. So everybody involved has to firmly believe, yes, these are values that we want to reflect. I think you've got to invest in personal development, make sure that we've got leadership programs that are around that as well. So when someone comes in, we talk about our culture program at interview stages. We have a 3-hour induction process, which goes through that, and I'll try and meet everybody at induction as well. It's not always possible, obviously, but we've got a video that goes through what our values are, why they are important to us, and the working groups that sort of made them up in the first place.
Of course.
And make sure that we then communicate them effectively throughout everyday business. With regards to how we keep that going, we have the values up around the businesses. We have our history tile, which is also just gives a bit of heritage.
Saw that downstairs.
So just, if you've just come into the business, how can you very quickly get a sense of who we are and what's important to us? And hopefully that does that. We have quarterly one-to-ones with staff, which the one-to-ones are based around our values. So they will be questions relating to people's professionalism, how they deliver excellence, how they're trustworthy in their role, how they work together with other people in their department or other sites, and obviously how respectful they are. So the whole thing is centered around our values. We'll also have what we call a thank you card. So that's something that is recognised by managers and also directors. And that's a handwritten card from me, for example, to Joe in sales. He might have done something, anything that's seen as over and beyond their normal day-to-day existence. So if, for example, he's taken a call from a customer, they had a problem, and he's gone out of his way. So he's maybe got in his car and gone to find out a solution for them because they've broken down, they're stuck at home, or he might engage somebody else locally that can do it for him easier. So something rather than just taking the inquiry from a customer and looking after the immediate response, but going one step further and making the customer really have a wow experience. That's what we're looking to really sort of praise and say well done for. So I'll do a handwritten thank you to the person with a box of chocolates, deliver that out to them, and that then goes into an end of year draw where they can win £300 worth of vouchers or whatever it might be.
And this wasn't on the list of questions that I gave you before, but do you find that particular incentive, or not incentive, that's the wrong word, that particular process sort of allows or helps employees to really sort of buy into sort of the ethos and really sort of go above and beyond because they feel not only they're being rewarded for it, but being made part of something as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any one thing that we do that does that in its entirety.
Sure.
It's lots of little things that all have an effect. And it's really challenging because there'll be lots of things that happen on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, month-to-month basis, where the culture will feel like, from an employee perspective and also from a manager, I guess, it'll feel like it's been challenged. And like anything, emotions go in a bit of a roller coaster sometimes. And sometimes it'll feel like our culture program is working really, really well for a collective group of people or even an individual. But it'll also have periods where they think, actually, that's rubbish. We're not reflecting this as a company. And the importance is making sure we've got lots of checkpoints where somebody can say, actually, I don't agree. I don't think this is happening because of X, Y, or Z. But the important thing is to then, for our teams, to pull together and go, right, okay, why is that happening? Why is it not as good as it could be? What can we change? And let's do it together.
Brilliant. So we've talked obviously about Peter Cooper Motor Group a lot over the last sort of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think now it's a really good time, Darren, to get to understand a bit more about you.
Oh no, you sure?
Nothing too personal, don't you worry. So I guess the first thing that I really wanted to know, and I think we asked this in previous series, but I think it's a really good question when talking to successful people, is what's the most important piece of advice that you've had in your career?
I would say probably focus on building relationships. I always say it to people, especially in any customer-facing teams, but also even if you're not customer-facing and you're, sort of more back of house in your role, you're still working in a team. So people like dealing with people that they like, and people like buying from people that they like. People buy from people. So focus on the building the long-term relationships with customers, but also with your staff as well. From a leader perspective or a business owner, I think it's really important to make sure you've got a good, strong relationship with everybody that you're engaging with, whether that's a customer or whether that's a member of staff, because you want that loyalty and retention of both customer and staff. And the more loyal and the more that you can retain a consistent standard of staff, the better your overall customer experience is going to be, and obviously the more successful your business ends up being as well.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is probably recognise your shortfalls. Certainly in a business like ours where we have new cars, used cars, servicing, parts, body repair centre, leasing, prestige used cars, rental. There's lots of different elements to our business, buying and selling. And there's a number of different sites, a number of different franchises. We've also got an electrical business as well called My Trusted Electrical, which is effectively electrical contracting. So you can't be an expert in absolutely everything.
Sure.
So I've always really sort of made sure that I've got the best possible team around me, because I can't know everything and I can't be really good at every element of business, whether that's accounting, marketing, advertising, HR, all those sorts of elements. But what I will make sure is that I've got the very best people that I can find in every single area of the business that I need. If I've got a particular strength in that area as well, then brilliant. Hopefully we just complement and forge our way forwards together. but it's about making sure that you've got really good knowledge across all elements of the business. And I think the last piece would probably be never be afraid to fail.
Okay.
If you haven't got any failure at any element, you're not trying hard enough.
I think they say, don't they? You learn more from your mistakes than you do from your success.
Ideally, yes. Yeah, that would be the caveat. If you can learn from your mistakes, then don't be afraid to make them. If you don't learn, then try to minimise them.
And in sort of link to that, and it might well be the person or the people that gave you that advice, who sort of both professionally and personally, who sort of inspired you throughout your career in your life?
I guess through my life, as everybody would say, probably my dad to a huge extent. We've always had a really, really close relationship.
Yep.
From a business perspective, I don't think we've ever had a crossword.
Okay.
We've never fallen out or had a huge disagreement.
That's impressive over 30 years.
So I think generally, we've always been very aligned with our thought process. I guess because it's the same culture.
Sure.
But other people that have inspired me, it's really corny, but Richard Branson has always inspired me to a certain extent.
Sure.
Obviously he's got a very adventurous spirit. He's quite innovative, but he's also got an influence over lots of different industries, not just one. And I think there's a real skill to that.
We're not going to see Peter Cooper trains, are we, next year?
No, definitely not. I'm not going to follow in his suit, but I think I've always just admired that adventurous spirit of we can do that. Doesn't matter what it is, but it's just a belief that actually I can make that work. Yeah. More recently, we've done a lot of work with Alex Lewis, who is a quadruple amputee, local in Winchester, and we've supported him from a charity perspective. But listening to some of his talks, he is truly inspirational with how you just go with a situation that's happening, out of his control, but just completely adapts and with a positive mindset can just achieve anything. So if you don't know an awful lot about Alex Lewis, then look him up. He is incredibly inspirational, and there's loads of things that he's done to raise money and raise awareness. He's somebody that would come to the top of my mind.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a brilliant place to end, Darren. I think I will be looking into Alex Lewis and seeing what he's about. So thank you so much for your time today.
You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate it.